Welcome back to Up. I'm David Gura, and let's start with what the New York Post is calling President Trump's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Friday morning, the president had a gut feeling things weren't going to go his way, and so he launched a preemptive strike against Robert Mueller. In quick succession, there were 7 tweets attacking the special counsel's investigation. His instincts were right as we began to page through those sentencing memos about Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort. These were the headlines. Prosecutors say then-candidate Trump directed Cohen to commit 2 felonies, and Mueller wrote Cohen provided useful intel in the Russia investigation, revealing the former Trump attorney tried to set up a meeting between candidate Trump and President Putin in 2015. Well, the news last night wasn't any better for Paul Manafort. His lies started catching up with him. The allegations and revelations were so damning, a key figure from the Watergate scandal used the I word.
The House is going to have little choice going other than to start impeachment proceedings.
Well, President Trump ended the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day in much the same way as he started it, with a tweet sending Robert Mueller a thank you note untethered to reality. Quote, totally clears the president, he wrote, thank you. Joining me this hour, Mimi Rocah. She was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. Now she's an MSNBC legal analyst. Wajahat Ali is a contributing op-ed writer for the New York Times. Peter Sagal is, of course, the host of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR and the author of the incomplete book of running. And Heather McGhee is a distinguished senior fellow at the think tank Demos. Let's take a step back here and look at some of the key developments from Robert Mueller over these past several months, if we could. We got a timeline here. Let's start in August, where President Trump was hit with a double whammy. While Paul Manafort was found guilty on 8 counts of fraud by a jury in Virginia, Michael Cohen was pleading guilty to 8 counts related to tax fraud and campaign finance violations in a courtroom in New York. A few weeks later, there was the bombshell report that Paul Manafort agrees to cooperate with special counsel Robert Mueller, pleads guilty to reduced charges. We now know that was a bit of a dud. Mueller agreement after catching Paul Manafort in several lies. And then the Mueller investigation goes dark for a while, not to interfere with the midterms. But at the end of November, President Trump's lawyers submit written answers to questions from the special counsel. 9 days later, Michael Cohen pleads guilty in the Mueller investigation to lying to Congress about his work on plans to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. And a flurry of developments yesterday, as I mentioned, George Papadopoulos walking out of prison after completing his 14-day sentence for lying to investigators about his contacts with Russians. And Mueller filed the explosive sentencing documents for 2 former Trump advisors, Manafort and Cohen. We had that Southern District filing as well. Mimi, let me turn to you first of all. Go back to that New York Post cover mentioning other facets of the day that were bad for President Trump, including the market drop as well. But when it comes to this investigation, what changed yesterday? How pivotal was it?
I think it was very pivotal, David. And, you know, we could spend a whole hour, I think, just talking about the filings yesterday, but we're not going to do that. There's other interesting things to get to. But I'll try to highlight a couple of the things that I think were so important. Look, when Cohen pled guilty to the lying about the Trump Tower Moscow last week, that was huge in and of itself. Now we have Mueller talking about sort of getting into the substance of that a little bit more in the filings about Cohen's cooperation, right? And while it's not spelled out, I think what's coming to light more and more is that those business deals that Cohen lied about, and I'll talk about maybe others who might have lied about it in a second, are so intertwined with this campaign, collusion, election interference that we've all been focused on. And we've sort of been focused on that one piece of it. And what's starting to take shape, I think, is a narrative, if you will, that Mueller has long known, but I think we're just starting to see it. And Mueller knows so much more about it than we yet can see. But it's this idea of the business and the political intertwine. That is ultimately, I think, what is going to bring down Trump, frankly, because it is the greediness, it is the inability to let go of the desire to seek these business opportunities in Moscow. It's this long-standing relationship that we now know went back to 2015 when people were seeking out Russians were seeking out talking to Trump about, we think, business opportunities and probably a campaign. So I think this is in some ways bigger than any of us had imagined in terms of the scheme that was orchestrated. Now, who orchestrated it and who had knowledge of the different parts of it, we're, I think, still figuring it out. We know Cohen had some knowledge of it and some pieces of it. But in my mind, you've got different players in sort of different areas. The other big thing that I think came out of both Mueller's filings and the Southern District filing, which in some ways I think the Southern District filing is even more explosive, but the other big thing is this idea of the coordination of the lies. There were lines about that in both Mueller's filings and in the Southern District about Cohen's lies to Congress, about Manafort's lies to the FBI, that you have this idea of people sending signals or getting their story straight, both publicly and privately. And you know who else does that is Donald Trump. So a lot of what was written about Cohen in both filings could have been written about Trump, I think, about trying to get messages out to other potential witnesses and make sure everybody had their story straight. And then the last thing I'll say in summary, sorry, I'm trying not to take up the whole hour here, is the Cohen filing by the Southern District. It directly implicates Trump very clearly and explicitly. It had been done before, now it's explicit, in this campaign finance scheme. Does that mean he's guilty of a crime? I'm not going to go quite that far yet. The Southern District is not charging him, not just because he's the president. It's because you have to show certain levels of intent and knowledge about the law. Can they show that? I think the answer to that is probably yes, but we don't have all of those facts. But what we do know, and this is separate from can he be charged with a crime, he was part of the scheme. That's something Congress can consider for impeachment purposes, independent of whether he's charged under, could be charged under Title 18.